In our headlines at this hour, come June 21st, that is tomorrow afternoon, South Korea's domestically developed launch vehicle Nuri will blast off into space following 2 delays last week amid strong winds and a technical glitch, respectively. And on the local front, unvaccinated people are now allowed to visit family members and friends at nursing homes as long as reservations are made in advance and negative COVID-19 test results are submitted. Over in France, French President Emmanuel Macron won 245 seats at the National Assembly, falling short of the 289 needed to maintain a majority in the lower house chamber. Hello, you're watching the Daily Report for Monday afternoon, June 20th, here in South Korea. I'm Min San-hee. South Korea's space rocket Nuri is back up on its launch pad. Earlier on this Monday, Nuri was transported 1.8 kilometers on a carrier vehicle from where it was assembled to where it will take off for a second time on Tuesday afternoon. Engineers at Naro Space Center in Kohung, Jeollanam-do Province are expected to connect Nuri to its umbilical cables by 7 p.m. this evening. Now, these cables link Nuri to the control room and provide the rocket with fuel and oxidizers in the hours before the launch. Now, if all goes according to plan, Nuri will blast off tomorrow, that is June 21st. And while we count down to that historic moment, my colleague Han Sung-woo in this following report covers the events that hindered last week's planned launch. To take a look.
June 14th, 7 a.m. The Korea Aerospace Research Institute and the Ministry of Science and ICT delay Nuri's second launch, originally scheduled for June 15th, 24 hours due to strong winds.
Today's weather forecast posed obstacles to the transportation of the rocket, and once it's erected, the screening of umbilical cords and connecting the cables could have been dangerous for the engineers.
Rise and shine June 15th at the Naro Space Center in Kohung, Jeollanam-do Province, where in one day, South Korea's first homegrown space rocket would blast off from. With Nuri still next to the umbilical tower, engineers realize something's not right with the oxidizer level sensor in the three-stage rocket's first stage. Its readings static when they're supposed to change in value. An issue that didn't arise during its first launch last year, which failed to put a dummy satellite into orbit after the rocket's third stage burned out earlier than expected. Officials concluding at the time the loosening of a fixture holding a helium tank inside the third stage's oxidizer tank was the problem. And on June 15th at 5:15 p.m. comes the decision to postpone the launch indefinitely.
After trying to figure out the issue at the launch pad, we realized it was not possible to get up close and analyze the problem while it's standing up. That's why we decided it's impossible to carry out the launch at the moment.
With the monsoon season also approaching, fears mount that an issue with the sensor itself, not the electric cable or terminal box, could require the separation of Nuri's first two stages and push the launch well past June 23rd, the last day of the rocket's alternative launch window. Then on June 17th at 5:30 p.m., a miracle. Authorities announced they've replaced the core of the oxidizer level sensor in Nuri's first stage that was malfunctioning without disassembling the rocket, and confirm the sensor now works fine.
At first, we thought Nuri's first and second stages would have to be separated to replace the problematic sensor itself, but researchers at the Korea Aerospace Research Institute, after close examination, found the issue could be solved by replacing just one key part that was malfunctioning.
Hence, a new launch date, June 21st. And now, all that's left, Nuri soaring into the skies, so that South Korea can become the world's 7th country to launch a space rocket independently capable of placing a satellite weighing over a ton into orbit using domestic technology. 한성우, Arirang News, 고흥.
In other news, starting on this Monday, unvaccinated visitors will be allowed at care facilities for the elderly. The move comes amid a further decline in the daily COVID-19 tally. Our Lee Kyung-eun reports.
Care homes and nursing hospitals were the last places with COVID-19 restrictions in place. The measures included a ban on in-person visits for unvaccinated people and limiting the number of visitors to 4.
인원 제한이 있어가지고
다 못 들어왔어, 엄마.
하고 다른 사람 그냥
밖에서.
But starting Monday, face-to-face visits are allowed for anyone regardless of their vaccination status. And people no longer have to abide by the 4-visitor rule if reservations are made in advance and a negative COVID-19 test result is provided. Also starting Monday, patients at these facilities are free to go outside if they had 4 shots or been infected after getting 2 shots. Up until now, they were only allowed to leave care facilities for medical purposes. The eased restrictions come as the country's daily cases have remained below the 10,000 mark for 10 days. There were 3,538 cases reported on Monday, the lowest in 160 days. This largely due to a boost in natural immunity following the massive Omicron outbreak. However, health authorities are still concerned about the 100 fatalities reported on a weekly basis, as well as the prospect of another wave of infections expected in fall or even earlier, as they say people's immunity will likely weaken. While authorities are preparing response measures for a future wave, they will also start discussing vaccinating young children aged from 6 months to 5 years old, in line with a similar decision made by the U.S. FDA. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the government will fight soaring fuel prices with additional tax cuts. This is according to Seoul's top finance and economy official, who also spoke of keeping utility bills that is, within certain limits. Our Om Ji-young has details.
With gasoline prices hitting daily record highs in many countries around the world, the South Korean government is trying to ease the burden on local drivers. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho announced at an emergency meeting on Sunday that the tax cut on fuel will be increased to the highest level allowed by law.
Starting from July, in order to lower the prices of petroleum goods, there will be a further cut to the fuel tax to the legal cap of 37%.
It's already been cut by a record 30%, with the fuel tax now at around 40 US cents per liter. Under the new measure, there'll be an additional cut of 5 cents a liter. Fuel prices in South Korea have trended higher for a 6th week in a row, hitting record highs. According to the oil price website Opinet, run by the Korea National Oil Corporation, the average price of gasoline on Sunday was roughly 2,108 won per liter. That's more than $1.60 depending on the exchange rate, breaking a 10-year high. Diesel, which has usually been cheaper than gasoline, has also risen to an all-time high, surpassing gasoline at around 2,116 won. With fuel prices soaring, the government will also provide tax benefits for people who are choosing to take public transport.
From the second half of this year, the income tax deduction rate will be doubled to 80% when public transport fares are paid by card.
He added that the government will also work to bring down food prices. It's going to closely monitor supply, provide discounts, and remove import duties on certain items that are likely to see price surge further. To further minimize the hit to consumers, the government is going to minimize the increase in utility bills as well.
Although production prices are rising amid the surge in global energy prices, the government, through painstaking effort, will minimize the hike in electricity and gas bills.
Chu also announced support for living expenses for those in groups deemed socially vulnerable. From this coming Friday, payments of 1 million won each, or about $770, will be distributed to some 2.3 million households on low incomes. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Over in the UAE, nuclear regulators there have granted an operating license for the third unit of the Barakah nuclear power plant built by South Korea. The Korea Electric Power Corporation says the subsidiary operator Nawa will start loading fuel and prepare for its commercial operation. Now, in light of the latest approval, KEPCO adds 3 out of the nuclear plant's 4 units have been licensed. This particular plant is the Arab world's first multi-unit operating nuclear energy plant and is located in Abu Dhabi. The construction contract was won by KEPCO back in the year 2009 and marks the first export of a South Korean-made commercial atomic power plant. Elsewhere, South Korea and the U.S. will host their regular defense talks in Washington next month. The exact date for the Korea-U.S. integrated defense dialogue has yet to be set, but it is expected to take place before mid-July. The biannual talks will most likely cover ways to boost the bilateral security alliance, including extended deterrent commitments and combined military exercises. The deployment of U.S. strategic military assets to the region will also likely be on the agenda in light of North Korea's provocations. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has failed to secure a tangible majority at the National Assembly. Our Yun-chan has more on the implications of the latest elections.
Results from French elections on Sunday showed that President Macron's centrist ensemble coalition had won the election with 245 out of a total of 577 seats at the National Assembly, but had fallen short of the 289 seats required for a straight majority. This is the first time in 20 years that France's ruling party has failed to win a majority in the lower house chamber. Socialist veteran Jean-Luc Mélenchon's new leftist coalition secured 131 seats, becoming the main opposition force. Marine Le Pen's right-wing National Rally becomes the third largest party with 89 seats, which, compared to the 8 seats it had in the outgoing parliament, marks a historic success with a more than tenfold in its number of lawmakers. Christian Jacob, the outgoing head of Les Républicains, said his party will remain as the opposition, but will be constructive, suggesting case-by-case deals rather than a coalition pact.
It's a stinging failure for Emmanuel Macron, who is paying for his cynicism to have always exploited the extremes. As far as we are concerned, we campaigned in opposition, we are in opposition, and we will remain in opposition.
This comes as a major setback for President Emmanuel Macron's centrist ensemble coalition. Since winning his second presidential term in April, the president has put forth an agenda to raise the retirement age, pursue a pro-business agenda, and deepen EU integration.
The situation constitutes a risk for our country in view of the challenges that we have to face, both on the national and international levels. But we have to respect this vote and consider its consequences.
Macron's party no longer has undisputed control, to which some analysts have shown concerns over potential political paralysis. But French politics now calls for negotiation and compromise. Yun-jin, Arirang News.
June 20th marks World Refugee Day, and this year the day comes amid the sufferings of Ukrainians as Russia continues its assault. Our Choi Min-jung shares the plight of people forced to flee their homes.
June 20th marks World Refugee Day. It's a day dedicated to honoring refugees around the globe who have fled their homes in search of safety. And for many, it will be the actual day they are forced to move across borders simply to survive.
I'm a single parent. I have 3 children. There are no benefits there. The only way to survive is to rely on humanitarian aid.
We decided to leave. It is very difficult. No electricity, no water, no gas, nothing. How are we to live? Shelling, it has become very scary.
10 weeks after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the world reached a grim milestone. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the global refugee population is at a record high, with the total number of people forcibly displaced hitting 100 million in May. He noted that the war in Ukraine has resulted in the largest and fastest displacement in Europe since World War II. This year's theme of Right to Seek Safety highlights that everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, has the right to cross borders safely. Against this backdrop, the UN chief urged countries to keep their doors and hearts open to refugees.
My appeal to developed countries is you need to meaningfully increase the number of resettlement opportunities in your country, because it is so different to allow them to fully integrate in your societies or to keep them barely surviving in some of the most dramatically dangerous places in the world.
Watchers say countries worldwide must step up efforts to help refugees, as the cultural and economic assets that they provide will ultimately benefit society as a whole. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Right, and in part 2 of our program, we address the plight of Ukrainians amid Russia's invasion. See you in a few minutes.
What matters?
Welcome back. June 20th marks World Refugee Day, a day designated by the United Nations to honor refugees and their resilience in rebuilding their lives. Accordingly, in today's segment of Viewpoint, we shed light on the plight of some 7 million Ukrainians who have been forced to flee their homes in Ukraine for safety elsewhere. I have Lee Han-gu from the Korean National Red Cross. Han, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me today.
And I also have Professor Choi Won-gun from Gyeongju University. Professor Choi, again, it's a pleasure.
Good afternoon.
Right, Han, let's start with you. I understand back in April you were at a refugee center in Romania. Could you tell us a bit about the purpose of that trip and your observations there?
Yes, Sunny. I was in the neighboring countries, actually not only the Romania, neighboring countries of the Ukraine for almost full 2 months in March and April. Just to help your understanding a bit on the purpose of the trip, let me briefly explain about the history of the Red Cross. Actually, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement was born on the battlefield of Solferino in Italy in the 1859. Our founder, Zhang Dinang, shouted Tutti Fratelli. The meaning is all human beings are brothers, and mobilized the local community people to save lives of the wounded soldiers, regardless of their parties, actually. That's the origin of the Red Cross, and now, today, the Red Cross became the oldest and the biggest humanitarian network in the world. So, still, the primary mandate of Red Cross is to save lives of the people on the battlefield in the armed conflict situation, regardless of their nationalities, religious belief, race, and the political opinions. Just back to the Ukraine crisis a bit. Globally, the Red Cross tried to prepare the Ukraine Red Cross. There is a Red Cross in Ukraine, like Korean Red Cross in Korea, to cope with the properly expected humanitarian impact when the crisis occurred. But as all of us have seen so far, the humanitarian impact to the people was much, much bigger than wider we expected. So right after the crisis occurred, almost at the same time, all the Red Cross in the world launched their emergency appeal to mobilize the resources to maximize their capacity to help the affected people in the Ukraine and neighboring countries. Korean Red Cross also launched the domestic appeal in Korea. So far, we have mobilized around 6.3 billion to Korean won, with the active participation of 34,000 individuals and the legal entities. It gave us a huge responsibility to deliver humanitarian assistance to those in need in a most effective and efficient way. That's why I have been there to assess all the situation and the most effective way to deliver our humanitarian assistance. Just I share my feeling from the scene, from my observation. Actually, it's two different ironic feelings I felt. One is desperation, because I could see the thousands of mothers and children fleeing their homes. They lost their home just in a day, and they don't know about their tomorrows. Nobody promised anything for them. I could feel their anxiety through their eyes, because I'm also the father of the little son, so I could feel them, the desperation. At the same time, I could see also strong solidarity shown by the people, not only the people actually, the government, civil society organization, and private sector, the individuals, they gathered all together to support those people in need. So honestly, I could witness the Tutti Fratelli with my eyes on the scene.
Right, brotherhood.
Yes, exactly.
Professor Che, before Russia's invasion, Ukraine was home to between 20,000 and 40,000 ethnic Koreans, some of whom have chosen to seek shelter here in the country. They're also known as Koryoin. Could you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah, in early April, around 50 Koryoin came to Korea, came from Ukraine through Poland, and they finally sought asylum in temporary accommodation in Gyeongju, in help with the help of the Koryoin community there. Well, and it seems like they came to Korea without any preparation, of course, because it was kind of an incident. So especially they came here with probably the overseas Korean visa, not a refugee application process. So it seems like they are not prepared, and so after a couple of months, 2 months later, now they are seriously worried about their livelihood in Korea now. So it seems like it is a very significant moment to Korean government to provide a necessary livelihood support for those Koryoin groups in Gyeongju area. Well, actually, most of the OECD countries use their ODA, the Official Development Aid budget, to support the refugees and asylum seekers in their home countries, which we usually call the in-donor state refugee cost, ODA. So technically, the Korean government have plenty of a budget to support the refugees and asylum seekers in Korea. And there is a group of Koryoin really looking for help from the outside. So it is a kind of the assistance is necessary for them. And also Korean government should consider the temporary visa exemptions and the travel cost support for those Koreans considering to coming to Korea to protect themselves from the war.
Right, and along with the Koryoins, Han, in total, some 7 million Ukrainians are believed to have left their homeland thus far. What more can you tell us about them?
Yes, actually, according to the UNHCR, it's not the Red Cross, but anyway, as of 19th June, 7.7 million people have crossed the borders to the neighboring countries, looking for just a safe place to live. But almost 2.5 million already returned to their home in the Ukraine, but still 5 million, more than 5 million people are seeking a dignified life in an unfamiliar environment. So, but considering the displaced people in the Ukraine, the number is much increasing. It's much bigger. Almost 15 million people need immediate humanitarian support right now. Of course, a big number means a bigger impact to the human beings. But what I would like to emphasize at this moment is that it is an inevitable choice just to leave. Before the crisis, the older Ukrainians lived like us, like you today and our today in Korea. The older children were going to school, kindergarten, and they're playing with their children. And after work or the holidays, the people gathering all together, enjoying their time with their family and friends and beloved one. Then just in a day, suddenly, this tragedy happened. The affected people, they didn't do anything wrong. It's not their fault or just mistake. All they just innocent victims. Again, for them, it was just an inevitable choice to them. So I just want to ask all the Korean citizens and also you, we need the empathy for the people from this perspective.
Right, and we need greater support, of course. Professor Che, you mentioned a bit about the efforts by the Korean government to better support Korean Ukrainians. Could you tell us a bit more about that support system that we need to have in place?
Yeah, so basically the core principle of the international refugee protection is responsibility sharing. And as a member of the international community, the Korean government as well as Korean society have a responsibility to protect our refugees. And until the end of May, according to the statistics of the Ministry of Justice, we don't actually see any direct incoming refugees from Ukraine yet. And then also there isn't many people, the Ukrainian people looking for asylum in Korea yet. However, if the war goes longer, then there possibly be a vulnerable people in Korea, especially from the Ukrainian citizens. For example, the MOJ already extended in humanitarian purpose the visa status in February for the Ukrainians living in Korea. So there isn't technical legal issues that Ukrainians continue their studies or business or whatever they do in Korea. But if the war goes longer, the vulnerable groups, for example, students are usually rely on the financial support from the families. So also some of the families with the children might have some financial challenges in Korea. So it is time for the Korean government to prepare those situations and open their mind to support the financial and other humanitarian assistance. Also, I just want to remind the people that we also need care about the possible asylum seekers and refugees from Russian side. I mean, because of the political situations in Russia and the opposition party members or the civil society activists against the war activities could be the target of political persecutions and not only in Russia but also in Korean territories. So we should consider both sides, the Ukrainians and the Russians, to provide international legal protection for those possible asylum seekers.
Right, I see. Han, going back to the refugee centers in the neighboring countries of Ukraine, how are these centers being operated and what exactly is the role of the Red Cross there? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sorry, but before answering to your question, I just want to share the information regarding the comment from the Professor Chair, because it's a really good point. Our mandate is the supporting the people in needs and not the targeting one specific ethnic group or the one nationalities. So I thank you for your really good point from the humanitarian perspective. And also I'd like to share the important information. The Korean Red Cross is now currently implementing the unconditional cash program for all the people affected by the Ukraine crisis and currently residing in Korea. So we are just providing the livelihood support for 3 months for any eligible Ukrainian people or the Koryoin or other nationalities fled Ukraine. So far, only 200 plus people applied for the program and received the cash support. So if any eligible people residing in Korea interested in this program, please contact Korean Red Cross or the Ukrainian Embassy in Seoul for further information. And then just back to your question. Thank you for your understanding. Actually, reviewing the situation in Romania, there are more than 1 million the Ukrainian crossed the border coming into Romania. 90% of the people just on transit, heading to other Western countries, and around 100,000, it's a still big number, which to stay in Romania. The impressive aspect of this crisis is we cannot find the traditional type of refugee center for mass population. It's because of the solidarity shown by the people, because the local community accommodate all the refugees in their community. The household open their house for the refugees. And just let me share the story, what I have seen in Romania. In Brașov is one of the cities, name of the cities in Romania. The real estate company opened the whole apartment building for the refugees. So in the whole apartment building, more than 50 households, the 200 people, most of them are children, of course, can be accommodated in the safe place. So in partnership with these local partners, Romanian Red Cross also runs free community store to provide the integrated support depending on the changing needs of the people. Because the needs are changing depending on the season and depending on the time. Because there was a winter, they were fleeing Ukraine, but now it's summer. Now they need the summer clothes. Like this, the needs are changing. So depending on their needs, this community center provide any kind of support what they need. In partnership with the Romanian Red Cross, the Korean Red Cross ensures appropriate and sustainable operation of 4 centers in Romania. And also adding to that, Korean Red Cross is in close contact with the Ukrainian Red Cross. Thank you for the digital technology from this perspective. And based on the needs and demands identified by the Ukrainian Red Cross, we have provided more than 15,000 milk powder for infants and also 19 emergency relief vehicles to support humanitarian action on the field in Ukraine.
Right, I see. Professor Che, back here in South Korea, it's been a decade since South Korea passed the Refugee Act, and it's been 9 years since its implementation. That being said, how far have we come in our efforts of offering refugees a chance to rebuild their lives here in South Korea?
Well, unfortunately, there aren't many changes since the beginning of the Refugee Act. I mean, of course, the Refugee Act itself was a huge, big progress to institutionalize the refugee protection norms in Korean legal system. But as you just mentioned, the implementation is facing a big challenges in Korea. I mean, there were some positive changes, of course. One example is that the Korean government started the resettlement program. This is the second time in Asia after the Japan's pilot program. So every year, 30 to 50 refugees are invited by Korean government to come to start their new life here. And Korean government and many NGOs provide various support for them. So that's a good changes. However, there are still things in a challenge. For example, the number of refugees recognized in Korea and the rate of the refugees from the asylum seekers are still way behind than average number of the developed countries. Well, also the Korea's refugee status determination process, which we call the RSD process, is somehow need much space to improve because, for example, the transparency and the professionalism in RSD processes is kind of in challenge. I mean, just a couple of years ago, one of refugee advocacy group, the Refugee Rights Center, Nansen, unveiled the manipulation of the refugee interviews and an interpretation report. That was a big scandal in the refugee status determination process. But after the court decision, the hundred of the refugees get a second chance to apply their refugee status determination. So it was a good thing to change. But anyway, it shows there is a lot of the legal and institutional changes still need in Korea's refugee screening systems. Also, I just want to point out the economic and social rights of the asylum seekers and refugees in Korea. I mean, the law allowed Korean government to provide economic and social support for those people, but still, in practice, the budget and other programs are way behind than the expectation of the asylum seekers in Korea. So they are having daily challenges in every moment of their life. So it is time for the Korean government to consider to support the social and economic rights of the refugees and asylum seekers.
Right. Hopefully that support will come in the near future then as Ukraine is suffering. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today, but Professor Che, thank you very much for your thoughts. And Han, thank you so much for being here and raising awareness about the situation over in Eastern Europe.
Thank you.
Over in Paris, South Korea is poised to make its pitch for the 2030 World Expo to be held in the southern port city of Busan. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is at the BIE seeking international support for Busan's bid. The BIE is an intergovernmental entity that supervises World Expos. Busan's rivals are Rome and Riyadh. The government here believes the expo will bring 50 million visitors to Busan and create some 500,000 new jobs. A South Korean teenager is making headlines both here in the country and abroad for becoming the youngest winner of the so-called Olympics of Piano. Our Song Yoo-jin has highlights.
South Korea's Lim Yun-chan has become the youngest ever winner of the Cliburn International Piano Competition. On top of winning gold on Saturday, the 18-year-old also clinched the Audience Award and the Beverly Taylor Smith Award for Best Performance of a New Work. Lim was one of the 6 finalists who performed at the Bass Performance Hall in Fort Worth, Texas. For his final round, he played Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 3 in C minor and Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor. His performance mesmerized not only the audience, but also left jury chair and conductor Marin Alsop in tears. Alsop said Lim showed, quote, exceptional musicality, artistry, and dazzling technique. After the award ceremony, Lim said he was happy to connect with the audience.
If my sincerity while playing the music reached the audience, I think I'm satisfied.
Lim's win comes with a cash prize of $100,000 and 3 years of international concert tours and career management. But he is not the first South Korean to clinch the Van Cliburn. Pianist Son Ye-kwon, who was 27 at the time, won gold in the previous competition in 2017. And with a number of South Koreans now sweeping top prizes at prestigious competitions such as the Queen Elizabeth competition and the Jean Sibelius violin competition, experts say more will come.
It is not an exaggeration to say that nowadays almost all South Korean classical artists are preparing for international competitions. As these challenges are now bearing fruit, I think more accomplishments will come and more Korean musicians will rise to international stardom.
First held in 1962, the Van Cliburn competition is held every 4 years and is known as the Olympics of Piano. This year, 4 South Koreans qualified for the semis, but Lim only made it to the finals. Another South Korean, Shin Chang-yong, also won the Jury Discretionary Award. 송유진, Arirang News.
On the entertainment front, BTS's new album, Proof, has topped the Billboard 200 chart, securing the group its 6th #1 album. The anthology album sold 314,000 equivalent album units in the US in its first week of release. The majority of the sales were of the CD version of the album. Proof was released 4 days before BTS announced plans to explore solo projects. A piece of delicate artwork from the unified Shilla period has been prompting much acclaim from experts here. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us why.
Unbelievable. This can't be something that's man-made. The words of experts after seeing a gold leaf artifact unearthed from South Korea's Donggung Palace and Walji Pond in November 2016. Gyeongju National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage finally unveiled this sophisticated, outstanding gilt relic from the 8th century on Thursday. The artifact was initially discovered as 2 separate pieces, situated approximately 20 meters apart from one another. But after going through a conservation process, it was found to have been one single artifact. Bird and flower patterns are intricately engraved on the thinly spread out gold that measures 3.6 centimeters by 1.17 centimeters. The jaw-dropping patterns are carved at a thickness of 0.05 millimeters. That's finer than a human hair and even difficult to see with the naked eye. Experts all agree that this artifact displays the essence of 8th century unified Shilla period metalwork.
Delicately having all the elements one would want with flawless technology, it is not an exaggeration to say this is a global-level craftwork.
Experts say gold leaf engraved with these patterns also reveals Western influences, but ones which have been transformed in Shilla's own unique way.
We can see the outstanding craftsmanship of Shilla artisans from that time, showing the pinnacle of metalwork technology and the culture of that time. I hope this artifact can trigger more research on Shilla period metal craftwork.
This outstanding relic will be on display for the public at the Gyeongju National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage until October 31st through an exhibition titled The Blooming Flowers and Birds on 3cm Gold Leaf. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Calf farming is the use of farming practices to advance healing or to offer educational calf support. Well, one county in Jeollanam-do province is seeking to make this therapeutic manner of farming a regional attraction. Our Gyeongju explains.
This is a parrot experience center in Gyeongju County, Jeollanam-do province. Parrots show off their colorful plumage to visitors, soar into the air in groups before descending to feed. A horseback riding experience center is also in full swing at a farm set up by a couple who left city life and moved to Jeju Island. Experiences like these are known as care farming or healing agriculture, and they're becoming popular in South Korea.
I came to ride horses because my school told me to. It's fun when the horse slows down and then goes faster.
We hope to create a friendly environment where people could meet horses. So people come here to meet and feed their horses and experience horseback riding.
Courses are taught at the Gyeongju County Agricultural Technology Center to train people how to run these kinds of experience centers. Even on lazy afternoons, 30 or so people fill the classrooms eager to learn.
It seems that Gyeongju, which is currently falling behind in industrialization, has become a great place to develop and educate people about healing agriculture.
The center is over 7 hectares big, and before the pandemic, about 20,000 people came from all over the country.
Gyeongju is called a roofless art museum because of its beautiful mountains, sea and clean farmlands. I think this natural environment is the best place to develop healing agriculture for modern people to recover their exhausted minds and bodies.
Officials say they aim to establish the region as a mecca for care farming and healing agriculture by setting the industry standards. Gyeongju, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Landslides and flooding caused by heavy monsoon rains over the weekend in Bangladesh and India have left dozens dead and millions homeless. Experts have said that this could be Bangladesh's worst flood since 2004. According to officials, at least 21 people were killed by lightning strikes since Friday, while another 4 were killed by landslides, and around 3 million have been displaced. Meanwhile, authorities in India's Assam state have said that since Thursday, 18 people have died in the floods, while 2 million more have lost their homes. Over 100 Apple workers at a store in the U.S. state of Maryland have successfully voted to unionize, making them the first such union at the tech giant. The measure was passed on Saturday in a vote of 65 for and 33 against, alongside a handful of abstentions. 2 other Apple stores in New York and Atlanta are also in the process of launching their own unions. In an open letter penned to the company in May, the Apple Core Union said that its aim is to improve workers' rights without causing management conflict. According to union leaders, employees at over 24 Apple stores have expressed interest in unionizing as well. Hundreds of people have demonstrated in the Tunisian capital of Tunis against the president's efforts to hold a constitutional referendum. The second day of protests on Sunday saw demonstrators oppose the referendum called by President Kais Saied. His political opponents say the measure could lead to Saied clutching onto power in the country. The weekend protests follow a strike on Thursday against economic reform plans, which led to a near-nationwide standstill. The referendum planned for July 25th is set to be boycotted by many of Tunisia's political parties. The Brazilian city of Sao Paulo has seen the return of the largest pride event in South America. The event had been held online for the past 2 years due to COVID-19. Hundreds of thousands of people poured into Sao Paulo's Avenida Paulista on Sunday in celebration of the 2022 LGBTQ+ event. According to the parade's director, roughly 5 million people were expected to attend. This year, the focus of the parade was on voting awareness and the upcoming October presidential election. Swimming's global governing body, FINA, announced on Sunday that it passed a vote to restrict transgender women from participating in elite female competitions. In a vote cast by 152 national federations during the Budapest Swimming World Championships, 71% backed the measure. The decision follows a scientific report which indicated that even after medically lowering their testosterone levels, transgender women still have an advantage over cisgender female swimmers. A new category will be created that allows male to female transgender athletes to compete. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Monday afternoon. Well, no one likes the combination of heat and high humidity, but that's what we have to get used to. And it's going to be stifling and muggy with Seoul reaching 30 degrees and Daegu soaring to 34. A heat advisory has been issued in a portion of Jeollanam-do and Yeongnam regions, so try to avoid spending an extended period of time outside during the peak time. And the space rocket Nuri has been successfully transported and is ready for the launch. And the weather in Gohung, Jeollanam-do province, where Naru Space Center is located, looks pretty nice. And tomorrow on launch day, there will be a little bit of rain in the morning, but overall, it's going to be fine for the blast-off. So we'll have our fingers crossed for a successful launch. And this year's rainy season starts from Jeju before moving northward. But the amount of rainfall will be less than expected, 5 to 20 millimeters. And there are showers in the forecast in some inland regions due to unsettled air. And downpours of up to 30 millimeters with stormy conditions possible. And later this week, southern regions are also going to be under the influence of the rain, and the sweltering hot weather should continue for the rest of the country. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
And those are the headlines for this Monday afternoon. Thank you for watching. See you on Tuesday.